got back from the comic book shop where I picked up a whole stack of DC books this week. I think we're looking at 5 new Batman books. And not only am I pretty sure that I picked up every Batman book this week, but I am reading and reviewing all 5 of them for you guys today. So quick going through them here in alphabetical order. We've got Catwoman, number 43, with a pretty sexy cover. The Knight, part 5 of 10 in Chip Zdarsky's Batman Origin run. So last month when I picked this up, I promised that I would get caught up so I could review this in its regular rotation, which I did, so I will have a review for you this week on this. We have another excellent Nightwing cover by Bruno Redondo this month, with issue 92. This has been a title that up until the last month or two has been kind of meandering a little bit, so I'm actually really excited to read this issue. Hopefully it sticks to its guns. We have Shadow War Zone number 1. Most likely the definition of filler, but I'll give it a read and we'll see how it goes. The Shadow War storyline has been great, so I was actually kind of excited to pick this up, although leafing through it, I'm pretty sure this is probably going to end up kind of low on the list when I get around to reading it. And then finally, my love-hate relationship continues with World's Finest with the release of issue number 3. Historically, this book has been all over the place. It's really the art that I'm picking this up for. All right, so lots to go over, so I'm going to get reading and let you guys know what happened this week in Batman. Alright, so having had the chance to sit down and read through my books, you guys pretty much know the drill. I've organized these least favorite to most favorite, and I'm excited to let you guys know what I thought. It was a pretty fun week overall this week. Definitely some titles that were lower on the list, which we'll talk about first, and on a high note, as I always like to do. But nothing was really bad. I actually had a lot of fun reading pretty much everything on here. Nothing particularly disappointing. Now, as far as like top tier books this week, we did have one title that in my opinion really knocked it out of the park, was a clear number 1, and can't recommend it enough. So all in all, a successful week with DC Comics. So let's get into the reviews. Kicking things off, we have, honestly not surprising, I think I mentioned it in the intro, Shadow War Zone number 1. Promised to be sort of Shadow War filler, and that's pretty much what this book was. We've got 4 stories in here. Cover price $5.99 with a cardback cover, although we're continuing with the awful DC cardstock that they've been using the last few months. Each story in this is 10 pages, so it's a 40-page book for $5.99. Not necessarily terrible value, and the content inside, I would say, from an artistic standpoint, is actually fairly good, although there is a pretty big range of art in this, and some of it works better for me than others. The Black Canary storyline at the beginning basically boils down to Black Canary wishing she had killed Deathstroke when she had the chance, and the League of Shadows attempts to enlist her in their army. We have kind of a great throwdown here between her and, is it Angel Breaker? Angel Breaker, that's right. And largely this story probably had the best art in the book overall. As far as the actual story itself, it was kind of a nothing burger for me, just because I don't have any idea what's been going on with the Black Canary. I don't know if this ties into what's been going on with Deathstroke Incorporated or what. Although at the end of the book, it looks like they are setting the stage for her to go to Nepal and play some kind of a major role in the Shadow War Omega conclusions. So probably going to be glad I read that story, just to set the stage for Black Canary so she doesn't completely show up out of nowhere. But this tie-in story didn't really do much more than that in terms of really immersing me into what's been going on with her overall and how she actually fits into all this. The next story in here is called Inner Demon, which stars Talia al Ghul, and it tells a story from her youth. And this is the one with the art that probably left me the most mixed, just because it was a little too kiddie, I guess. I'm not quite sure. I mean, it is very well done, and I think that the colors in this really support the title well. But even so, it just doesn't really read like it belongs in the same book as what we just got from the Black Canary. And it just made the book feel like it was sort of catering to 2 completely different audiences, and the dissonance of it just kind of got to me, because, like, you know, Ra's al Ghul is the classic Ra's al Ghul here, but he's illustrated like he's sort of in a Golden Books, and it just kind of took me out of it a little bit. That said, the story for this I actually found very interesting, because you're getting a glimpse into Ra's and Talia's relationship when she was a teenager, which we haven't really seen before, I don't think. And kind of the dynamics between her and her father in some ways kind of mirror Batman and Dick Grayson, and there's another story I read this week coming up that kind of reflects that a little bit. On top of that, you do get a guest appearance in this from Mother Soul, which sort of ties her into the greater DC universe now that she's been introduced in the Robin ongoing title, which was just kind of a nice touch, bringing everything together. Next up, probably the weakest story in this overall, both in terms of art and story, was Panic Room, which stars Ghostmaker and Clown Hunter. Ghostmaker now being in charge of Batman Incorporated, and Clown Hunter being his child prodigy. Now, if you guys have been watching my reviews, you know I really don't care that much for Ghostmaker. I think he's just kind of a pointless character. Clown Hunter, on the other hand, though, I've liked his character. I thought that you could do something really interesting with him. But they've kind of nerfed him, and he's just kind of another mask, another fake Robin type character. I was skeptical when I read whatever issue it was where, you know, Batman gave Clown Hunter to Ghostmaker to train. And kind of my worst fears in this have been realized now, looking at him, you know, in this title with Ghostmaker. It's just kind of lost all of its teeth, and I think that Clown Hunter is now, you know, kind of in, like, the Signal territory where he's just going to fade into obscurity and not really have anything that interesting to offer. Alright, so then that just leaves one final storyline, which I didn't really understand, to be completely honest, but this is called Ninjas at the Arcade. It follows Harley Quinn as she faces off with some ninjas at an arcade during Shadow War. The big revelation in this is that Luke Fox is trying to decide if he wants Harley Quinn on his team. This is written by Stephanie Phillips, so I'm not sure if this is going to tie into the greater goings-on of the Harley Quinn story, if Luke Fox is going to show up in there, or, like, what the deal is. But I have no idea what's been going on with Luke Fox in forever. Like, I mean, literally since the first few issues of Batwing that I read and kind of wrote off, I've paid no attention to that character. And so having him kind of show up at the end here didn't seem like it was really going to have much in terms of ramifications for Shadow War. Maybe for something in Harley Quinn or some other title that they've got coming up, you know, down the road that I don't know about yet. I guess time will tell. For me, while the writing was okay, the art was kind of blah. I don't know. It was another kind of nothing burger. It just didn't feel like it had that much impact in terms of the books that I'm reading. If you're someone who's, you know, reading Shadow War, you want to get everything, I suppose, you know, you'll probably want to get this book too, although it is very skippable, I would say. The only thing that really felt important at all was the Black Canary story at the beginning, and the Talia Ra's al Ghul dynamic made for some nice background character development, but not necessarily essential to the Shadow War storyline. Alright, so then second from the bottom, the book I have a love-hate relationship. My love-hate relationship with it continues this week. We've got Batman Superman World's Finest #3, a book that has got art of the week every week, guaranteed. Dan Mora's Superman, Batman, circa, you know, the days when Dick Grayson was still Robin and the DC universe was much younger. I mean, it's just unparalleled, and I think that this is maybe the best art of the series so far. Some of the stuff we saw in this book, just the characters in action, it's just awesome. I mean, it really is spectacular, jaw-dropping to look at, and it is the only thing carrying me through this book at this point. Last issue, we had some kind of great teases with, like, Robin and Supergirl and kind of their relationship and some of the banter that went back and forth. That was really the only kind of downtime we got in this book because there was just so many characters and concepts and teams getting thrown into the book that there's really no time to breathe except when Robin and Supergirl were going back in time to fight the demon in the past or whatever it was. And unfortunately with issue 3, we're just right back into breakneck pacing. We've got the Doom Patrol in here. We've got the Warriors of G, or She. I'm not sure how to say it, sorry. I'm not sure if this is a team that's existed before, if it's like a deep cut thing or what, because I've never heard of it before, but I would assume that this is from DC Universe past, since this has been kind of a tour of the DC Universe so far. Of course, we've got the Demon himself wreaking havoc upon the DC Universe. We've got Billy Batson not able to talk. I mean, what else have we got crammed into these 20 pages? Like, I mean, it's just absolutely absurd. how much is crammed in here. Oh, that's right. We've got Mirror Master and the Flash. We've got Felix Faust. I mean, I don't know, like, oh, Wonder Woman. I mean, if you love Dan Mora and you want to see what his artwork looks like across the DC universe, I mean, this is it. It does look amazing. I mean, look at Batman here. I mean, it's classic comic book goodness. And the way he draws the old costumes and the old characters just, gives me an incredible amount of nostalgia, but I just wish there was a story I could latch onto with it. Because it's really just putting the DC universe in a blender and churning it out for you, which is just disappointing. I want there to be some more focus, a bit more craft and nuance to the storytelling in this, because right now I'm just completely detached. It's literally just an art book for me. Okay, so then the book that landed right in the middle for me was an interesting one. I almost made it my second favorite, and then I almost made it my second least favorite, because I just couldn't decide exactly how I felt overall about Catwoman 43. And the reason that is because while the book is really enjoyable, it was just in no way the book that I was expecting. And the reason I put it right in the middle is because, expectations play a part in why you buy books, right? Like, you expect a certain thing going in, but at the same time, like, just because it's not what you're expecting, you have to ask yourself, well, is this a book that I like? And I did like this quite a bit. As a matter of fact, I think I liked it more than the 4 issues preceding it when Tini Howard first hopped on this book. But in terms of tone, obviously, as you can see, in terms of art, it feels like a completely different book. And I kept going back and wondering, did Tini Howard even write this? Because there was just sort of an underlying seriousness in Catwoman before this read, and it's completely gone here. We put Harley Quinn in the mix, we threw in some much more lighthearted, almost like Harley Quinn animated series artwork in here, and the whole thing is just kind of a romp. Catwoman is dealing with the fallout of Black Mask, but she just wants a weekend off, and so she decides to hang out with Harley for the weekend and go to a roller derby, and that's kind of the whole thing. As I'm describing it right now, I'm actually liking it more and more. There's a great little car chase here that I thought was really well executed. Really did a good job of conveying movement and action in a way that you could actually understand what was happening. This book also has some great parallel action here where Harley Quinn goes to get ice from a broken ice machine that's making all this rattling noise, while at the same time Catwoman is in a fight and nearly gets her butt kicked, which Harley Quinn can't hear over the sound of the ice machine, which is kind of great. And you can see the ice machine, in the background in her hotel room while she's being attacked, which I thought was a really nice touch. And yeah, it was just kind of a lighthearted, fun little read. And at the end also, sorry, mild spoilers here. Well, I guess actually complete spoilers here because I'm talking about the end of the book. But we also get an appearance from Red Claw at the end, which I thought was kind of cool. I don't know if Red Claw's been in the DC Comics before. I know Red Claw from the animated series, but that's kind of about it. So curious to see how that ties into the next issue, and I'm glad that this isn't just a one-off. It'll be interesting to see if next issue we stick with Bengal as the artist, or if we go back to the regular artist. I hope we stick with Bengal for this, because it definitely fits this story really well, and the new direction that Tini Howard has taken this title. I just find myself questioning, after this, couple chapter story arc, if we're going to end up right back where we were before with Catwoman, or is it going to go in another completely different direction? I'm just kind of so thrown for a loop by this book. If you like the Harley Quinn animated series and the comic book that came out with it, I would say this is definitely a pickup. If you've been really liking where Catwoman's been going the last few issues, I don't know how you're going to feel about this. If you're not a Harley Quinn fan, probably don't pick it up, because this feels more like a Harley Quinn book than a Catwoman book, which is probably its biggest detriment. But if you're like me and reading everything Batman, it was fun. I enjoyed it quite a bit. So then the book that was runner-up this week, not quite my pick of the week, but it was a very solid read nonetheless, has to go to Batman the Knight. This is issue 5 of 10, and my first review. So I'm trying to decide how much to really fill you in on. Now that, this series is half over and I finally hopped on, I read the first 4 issues last night, right before going out and reading issue 5. I think that the art in this is fantastic and really fits this story well. I wasn't sure how I felt about it when I first started reading it, and as it continued on, it really sold me, for whatever reason. It's not necessarily the artwork that I typically gravitate to, but I find it fitting this title quite well. One of my favorite things about this book overall boils down to the format of it. So this is a $4.99 book, 28 pages. So, your typical DC $4.99 title, but no backup story, single artist, single story, front of book to back, which I think is great. I think people would be much more on board with spending $4.99 on a book if you got 28 pages of the same story. Because having 28 pages, even though it's only 8 more pages, it's not a lot to work with. It really lets you immerse yourself deeper into the story, and it allows each book to feel like a whole unto its own. One of the things that's been interesting about this is you never pick up the next issue right where the last issue left off, if that makes sense. You always kind of jump forward in time, and then you kind of get caught up to what's been happening, or, the context of what you think is happening is actually shifted slightly from what you thought, and you enter the story in a weird place every time. And I always find myself wondering if I missed something, but then you read a couple pages in, and it actually makes perfect sense why the story is picking up where it is. And that's something I really have to applaud Chip Zdarsky for. I think he's done a great job making these books feel impactful on their own, as well as in the context of this bigger episodic Bruce Wayne to Batman origin story that's been promised here. Do we really need another Batman origin story? I'm not sure that it's completely convinced me yet that I do, although it's gotten pretty close. I think one of the benefits of this storyline is, you've got Ducard, you've got the various famous people that Bruce Wayne has trained with over the years that we already know about, but they're kind of in the background, and most of what we focus on is some of these new characters that he's introduced. Lucy, who is a cat burglar, sort of like a proto-Catwoman, who's much older than Bruce Wayne, but he sort of is infatuated with her. Kind of explains a lot about his character kind of down the road when he meets actual Catwoman. In issue 5 in particular, he's teamed up with a character known only as Anton, and I'm not sure if he's supposed to be Ghostmaker or not. The character in this issue in particular, there's sort of a implied bisexuality element to him, which kind of makes me wonder if it is supposed to be Ghostmaker, which honestly feels a little weird just because he's so cult of the new. It feels weird to have him in a book like this. And while Anton is his partner in this, he's actually working for this sort of Professor X lady here, who's like an ex-KGB agent that he's learning espionage from. So it'll be interesting to see, because this has been so episodic. Like, we only spend an issue and a half really in any one particular place before moving on to the next aspect of his quest, the next thing that he's looking out for. So it'll be interesting to see how all these ultimately tie together at the end, or if they do at all. I think it's really going to be the last half of the storyline that's going to kind of definitively convince me one way or the other as to if this book was, worth publishing or not. They definitely do a good job bringing his timeline up to speed, so it doesn't feel like, he's going through the quest to become Batman in 1940, 1970, like 1990, whatever it is. Like, this is clearly Batman from, the year 2002 or whatever. And it was interesting because I kept getting flashes of Nightwing in this, which obviously, spoiler alert, there's only one book I haven't talked about. Nightwing is my book of the week this week. And I thought that this and Nightwing made a great pairing, because you see Batman in his youth, and the way Chip Zdarsky writes him, for whatever reason, gives me flashes of Dick Grayson. But it's a Dick Grayson in which there wasn't a Batman to be kind of his safety net. And it kind of does a lot to explain why Dick Grayson is the way he is, while Bruce Wayne is very different than that. The grumpy father figure character makes more sense in the context of, he's someone who doesn't have a parent, whereas for Dick Grayson, for all intents and purposes, he has a much more direct father, mentor, and partner all in one in Bruce Wayne, which I thought was interesting. So that actually dovetails really nicely into my pick of the week, which is Nightwing 92. And I read this right after reading Batman the Knight, which maybe colored my experience for why I like this book so much, because it opens with a really, really great flashback. And this is where I have to go back to World's Finest, too, because you've got Batman and Robin in the classic costumes, wonderfully rendered by Bruno Redondo. And I got all the same feels I got from World's Finest, but the difference was this had a story that was poignant and that I could follow, had some good twists in it, and just made it that much more glaring how much is missing from Mark Waid's World's Finest title. But here we basically see Dick Grayson's Robin go against orders, defy Batman in order to save the day, and gets horrendously beat up for it. But he does still save the day. And Batman shows up at home, and Alfred basically has to put him in his place and say, look, like, you're not going in there as angry Batman. Like, take off your cowl. This is a moment where you have to be a support for Dick Grayson and not angry Batman. And ultimately, you know, Bruce Wayne listens, and that's what he does, which is a great, poignant moment. Shows us a little bit something about Batman, about Alfred, and about Dick Grayson, which will pay off a little bit later in the book. Just an absolutely great moment. We've had a couple of these flashbacks in the Nightwing title, and they've been highlights every single time. I kind of wish Tom Taylor and Bruno Redondo would do Batman and Robin as an ongoing series, but set during the World's Finest time period. I think that would be an absolutely killer book if they were to choose to do something like that. But again, just to wrap up what I was saying about the Knight, you know, here we see Dick Grayson's support structure, and, you know, as he's going through the things that Bruce Wayne did when he was training himself to be Batman, it's just a completely different environment. Even though they're actually very similar in personality and have a similar sense of resolve, the result ends up being very different. And so even though it wasn't necessarily, you know, an editorial decision to show that juxtaposition between those two books, it's very much there, and definitely worth taking a look at, especially if you're reading both of the titles. So anyway, on to the main event. After our flashback, we get into the story as we have seen it so far. Bruce Wayne shows up with Ace the Bat Hound for the big unveiling of Dick Grayson's project in Bloodhaven. We've got Blockbuster front and center here, which is great. I've been wanting to get back to the Blockbuster story proper. Obviously, he's been the reason that Dick Grayson's been on the run for the last few issues, but ultimately it's been just a bunch of henchmen running after him. Like, it hasn't really added up to much. Whereas here we really feel the payoff because Blockbuster is pissed and he wants, you know, to get his piece from Dick Grayson. And of course he has no way to do so because, of course, you know, here's Superman right here guarding the piece and making sure everything goes off without a hitch. And the story continues with some great supporting moments from Oracle. We've got the Zucco daughter in here. Oh, and this great double-page spread, by the way. I would love a poster of this if anyone's a fan of Nightwing. I'm sure you agree. And then at the very end, we get the reintroduction of Heartless. Finally. So, 92 was everything that I wanted it to be. Like, I've been wanting Nightwing to get back on track for a while. We had Fear State that really derailed it, and then we went right from that into this hired assassin chase story that ran for like 4 or so issues. It really felt like filler. It didn't really further the story along. It was just kind of there to sort of raise the stakes, I guess. And then last month, it felt like, you know, the story was really going to start to move forward. We got more Blockbuster. Here, they brought Heartless back in. We've got Oracle, Blockbuster, Batgirl, and Nightwing all coming together for what I think is going to be a wild ride over the next few issues. I'm not sure if this is all counting down to a big issue 100 or if this is going to wrap up somehow before then, but it really feels like this book is back on point and honestly at its peak since basically they introduced Melinda Zucco. Probably that Melinda Zucco origin issue was the last time I felt like Nightwing was really on top. So I'm excited to see this back true to form. Bruno Redondo and art. Tom Taylor writing a fantastic story. And I officially can't wait for issue 93. All right, guys, so that pretty much wraps up my extensive rambling. I felt like I had a lot to say this week. We'll see how long this video ends up being after I edit it, but thanks for joining me on the ride. You guys know I always love sharing what happened this week in Batman. I hope you guys have a great week in comics, and thanks for watching this video.